The sentence didn't sound real when it hit my ears. It sounded like something from a movie, too clean, too calm, too final. I already cut the brakes. I stopped moving. My hand was still on the doorframe, my jacket half off, my keys digging into my palm. The house smelled like reheated leftovers and lemon cleaner. Ordinary. That was the worst part. Nothing in the room warned me that my life had just split into a before and an after. I hadn't meant to be home early. I was supposed to sit in my car for another half hour, staring at my phone, rehearsing conversations I'd never have. But my boss had ended the meeting with that tone, the one that sounds polite but lands like a verdict. We're going in a different direction. Different direction. So I came home. Quietly. Habit. And that's when I heard my stepson's voice, low and excited, drifting from the kitchen. Not nervous. Not rushed. Almost proud. I already cut the brakes, he said again, like he was repeating a grocery list item. There was a pause. I expected shouting. Panic. Something human. Instead, my wife answered softly, "Did you make sure no one saw you?" Something cold slid down my spine. I stayed where I was, half hidden by the hallway wall. My heart wasn't racing. That surprised me. It felt quiet. Like my body had decided screaming wouldn't help. My stepson laughed under his breath. Relax. He never checks his car. That word landed heavier than the sentence itself. Not a name. Not a face. Just an object in the way. My first instinct was to step forward. To let my presence explode the moment. To demand explanations, threaten consequences, do something loud and righteous. That's who I used to think I was. Instead, I stood there, invisible, listening. My wife sighed, the way she did when bills came late or plans changed. Just don't get sloppy, she said. This isn't something we can clean up. Clean up. I finally understood something I'd been avoiding for years. This wasn't an accident waiting to happen. It was a decision already made. Calmly. Carefully. I backed away without making a sound. My shoes barely touched the floor. I stepped outside, closed the door gently, and stood on the porch like I was visiting someone else's life. The late afternoon sun hit my face. Normal. Cars passed. A dog barked down the street. The world hadn't noticed what I'd just learned. I leaned against the railing and breathed. This wasn't the first time I'd heard something I wasn't supposed to hear. It was just the first time the cost of ignoring it could be measured in a body. For years, I'd been the man who absorbed things. Tension. Disrespect. Disappointment. I told myself it was strength. Stability. Being the bigger person. Truth was, I'd gotten good at disappearing inside my own life. Inside the house, I heard a chair scrape. Footsteps. Laughter. They were moving on already. I stayed outside. A memory surfaced, uninvited. Me fixing a leaking sink at midnight because it was easier than arguing. Me apologizing for things I hadn't done just to keep the peace. Me nodding while my career stalled, telling myself loyalty would be rewarded. I'd mistaken endurance for virtue. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages. The man whose brakes had been cut, whoever he was probably finishing dinner somewhere, unaware that tomorrow had already been decided for him by someone else's kid. The thought made my stomach tighten. I went back inside later, after I was sure they'd moved on to another room. The house felt different now. Like I'd learned a secret language and couldn't unhear it. At dinner, we talked about nothing. Grocery prices. A neighbor's new car. My stepson scrolled on his phone, relaxed. My wife ate slowly, avoiding my eyes. I watched them both like a stranger. Every word tasted metallic. When my wife finally looked up, her gaze lingered on me a second too long. "You're quiet," she said. I forced a shrug. Long day. That was true. Just not in the way she thought. That night, I lay awake listening to the house settle. Pipes ticking. Floorboards creaking. Familiar sounds I'd once found comforting. My mind replayed the sentence over and over. I already cut the brakes. I thought about consequences. About what would happen if I spoke up now. Police. Courts. Explosions I couldn't control. I also thought about what would happen if I didn't. For the first time in a long while, the choice felt heavy enough to matter. I realized something else, too, something quieter but sharper. If I confronted them tonight, I'd be reacting. But emotional. Easy to dismiss. If I stayed silent a little longer, I could act. That idea settled into me, uncomfortable but solid. I wasn't afraid of them finding out. I was afraid of becoming the man who heard a thing like that and did nothing. Sometime after midnight, I got up and stood by the bedroom window, looking at the driveway. The car sat there under the streetlight, unassuming. A machine that trusted the hands that touched it. I understood then that this wasn't just about stopping something terrible. It was about deciding who I was when no one was watching. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew this. Tomorrow, that car wasn't going where they thought it was. And neither was I. By morning, the sentence had settled into me like a bruise. Not the kind that hurts when you touch it, but the kind you feel every time you move. I went through my routine on autopilot. Shower. Tie knotted too tight, then loosened. I stared at my reflection longer than usual, like I was waiting for the man in the mirror to say something useful. He didn't. On the drive to work, traffic crawled. Red lights stretched longer than they should. Every brake light ahead of me flared like a warning. I caught myself gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary, my mind replaying the image of that car in our driveway. A machine trusting the wrong hands. At the office, nothing had changed, and that almost made it worse. Same gray walls. Same hum of fluorescent lights. Same polite nods from people who barely knew me beyond what I fixed for them. I sat at my desk and opened my email. No follow-up from yesterday's meeting. No explanation. Just silence, which I'd learned was management's favorite language. I thought about the word my boss had used. Decisive. Funny how that word always seemed to apply to other men. I'd been with the company 8 years. 8 years of staying late, smoothing conflicts, covering gaps when someone else dropped the ball. When things broke, I fixed them. When deadlines slipped, I absorbed the pressure. When credit was handed out, I was always just outside the circle. Reliable. Steady. Not disruptive. I used to believe that was enough. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed. A message from my wife. Did you hear anything weird last night? My chest tightened. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. There was the opening. The invitation to step into the familiar role. Ask questions gently. Express concern carefully. Let her control the narrative. I typed 3 words. Just tired. Long day. Then I set the phone face down. The truth was I was tired. Just not of work. I was tired of being the man everyone leaned on but no one stood behind. At lunch, I sat alone in my car, engine off. The radio murmured something about the economy, about uncertainty, about adapting. Words that sounded important without meaning much. I thought about how many times I'd adapted. Moving cities for her job. Delaying my own plans so my stepson wouldn't feel unstable. Swallowing frustration because conflict felt selfish. I told myself that's what men did. They carried things quietly. They endured. But there was a difference between carrying weight and letting it crush you. A memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. The first time my stepson had looked at me like I was nothing. He was younger then. Angry. Testing boundaries. He'd knocked over a lamp and blamed me without hesitation. My wife had sighed, tired, and said, "Just let it go. He's been through a lot." So I had. Always did. That afternoon, my boss stopped by my desk. He didn't sit. Never a good sign. "We're moving forward with the restructuring," he said. "Some roles are going to change." I waited. He gave a thin smile. "For now, just keep doing what you're doing." There it was again. For now. After he walked away, something inside me hardened. Not anger. Clarity. I realized I'd been confusing patience with progress. On the drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. I let the silence work. The house came into view, sunlight glinting off the windshield of that car. The same car my stepson had talked about like it was disposable. I didn't go inside right away. I sat there, engine idling, and asked myself a question I'd avoided for years. If I fix this like I fix everything else, quietly, invisibly, what does that make me? Not a protector. A janitor for other people's messes. I finally understood something important. My entire life, I'd been rewarded for making problems disappear. But this wasn't a problem that needed disappearing. It needed consequences. Inside the house, laughter drifted through an open window. My stepson sounded relaxed. Untouched by gravity. I shut off the engine. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger clouds judgment. This felt different. Colder. Cleaner. I got out of the car and looked at the driveway again. The angle of the tires. The quiet certainty that something was wrong beneath the surface. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to confront. I felt the urge to prepare. Because fixing things had taught me something valuable. Before you touch anything, you understand how it breaks. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't planning to fix the mess. I was planning to make sure it couldn't be ignored. By the time I made the decision, it didn't feel dramatic. That surprised me. I'd always imagined life-altering choices coming with thunder, raised voices, slammed doors, something cinematic. Instead, this one arrived quietly, like a switch flipping in a room I'd been standing in for years. I slept for maybe 2 hours. Not because my mind was racing, but because it was focused. There's a difference. Panic scatters your thoughts. Resolve sharpens them. Before dawn, I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to my wife breathe beside me. Slow. Even. Untroubled. I wondered how long she'd been able to sleep knowing what she knew. That question hardened something in me. I got up without waking her and padded into the kitchen. The house was dark, the kind of dark that feels honest. I poured coffee I didn't drink and sat at the table, phone in my hand. I didn't search how to stop someone from killing another person. I searched mechanics. Brake failure symptoms. Brake line tampering. What happens when a car loses pressure at speed? Clinical words. Diagrams. No emotion. Every article confirmed the same thing. Whoever did this hadn't been reckless. They'd been deliberate. A cut brake line doesn't always fail immediately. Sometimes it waits. Lulls you into trust. Lets you build speed. That detail sat heavy in my chest. I closed the browser and stared at the blank screen of my phone. The next step was obvious. That scared me too. Calling the police now would start a firestorm. Accusations. Denials. A war inside a house that was already rotten underneath. Confronting them would give them time. Time to lie. Time to fix the evidence. Time to shift blame. I needed the car gone. Not destroyed. Not hidden. Gone. Intact, untouched, undeniable. At 6:47 a.m., I called a towing company. The man on the other end sounded bored. I like that. Vehicle not starting? He asked. Yes, I said. But I don't want it taken to a shop. There was a pause. Where do you want it? I gave him the address. The biological father's house. Saying it out loud made my pulse spike for the first time. You sure? The driver asked. That's not close. I'm sure. He sighed. It'll cost extra. I'll pay. That was it. No speeches. No justification. After the call ended, I sat there longer than necessary, listening to the refrigerator hum. I half expected guilt to crash into me. It didn't. What I felt was alignment. At work, I moved through the day like a ghost. I answered emails. Attended meetings. Nodded in the right places. No one noticed anything different. That made me smile briefly. By early afternoon, the tow truck texted to confirm they were on the way. I left work without explanation. No one stopped me. Of course they didn't. When I pulled into the driveway, the car was exactly where I'd left it. Sunlight glinted off the hood, harmless and innocent. My stepson's bedroom window was open. Music played softly. He was home. I felt a flicker of something then. Not doubt. Responsibility. This was the moment where men like me usually backed down. Talked things out. Tried to salvage harmony. I stayed seated. The tow truck arrived with a low mechanical groan. The driver climbed out, glanced at the car, then at me. Keys? He asked. I handed them over. As he worked, metal clanking softly, my stepson appeared in the doorway. What's going on? He asked, confusion creasing his face. I met his eyes. Cars being moved, I said. Why? For safety. He frowned. Whose safety? I didn't answer. That silence did more than any argument could have. When the car was loaded, I stepped forward and taped an envelope to the windshield. The driver raised an eyebrow. That for the shop? No, I said. For the owner. He shrugged. Not his business. As the truck pulled away, my wife rushed out, phone in hand. What are you doing? She demanded. I looked at her, really looked. I'm making sure no one dies, I said. Her mouth opened. She glanced down the street, panic flashing through the control she usually wore so well. You can't just. I already did. For the first time, she didn't have a response ready. Inside the envelope was a single line. Check the brakes. From your son. No accusations. No threats. Just truth delivered intact. As the truck disappeared around the corner, something heavy lifted off my chest. I knew what I'd done. I'd transferred responsibility. I'd taken the problem out of the hands of people who thought consequences were optional. And for the first time in a long while, I felt steady. Not safe. Not victorious. Steady. That night, the house felt like it was holding its breath. No one spoke much. Phones buzzed. Doors closed softly. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. Because silence isn't empty. Sometimes, it's just the space before everything catches up. I didn't follow the tow truck. That was deliberate. Some part of me wanted to see the delivery, to witness the moment the weight changed hands, but I knew better. This wasn't about watching the explosion. It was about making sure it happened where it belonged. Instead, I went back inside the house and waited. Waiting is something I've always been good at. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Every sound felt amplified. The refrigerator kicking on, a car passing outside, my wife pacing in the bedroom with her phone pressed to her ear. She didn't bother lowering her voice. This isn't what we agreed on, she hissed. I didn't need to hear the other side to know who she was talking to. I sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, and let the silence do its work. For years, silence had been my weakness. Today, it was my leverage. An hour passed. Then two. I checked my phone once, no messages from the tow driver. That told me everything I needed to know. The car had arrived. Where it arrived mattered more. I pictured the house in my head. The biological father's place. I'd been there exactly 3 times in 7 years. A modest house. Orderly. The kind of place where things were either broken or working. No pretending in between. I imagined the tow truck pulling up. The driver knocking. The father stepping out, confused, maybe annoyed. And then seeing the envelope. I wondered how long it would take him to open it. Seconds? Minutes? Would he read it once, then again, hoping the words would change? Check the brakes. From your son. No explanation. No context. Just a sentence heavy enough to bend the day around it. I knew what would happen next because I would have done the same thing. He would check. A real father always checks. The thought steadied me. Around mid-afternoon, my phone rang. A known number. I let it ring twice before answering. Yes. The man on the other end didn't introduce himself. His voice was tight, controlled. You sent a car to my house, he said. Yes. With a note. Yes. The pause. Breathing. I could hear wind in the background. I've already called the police, he said. I closed my eyes. Good, I replied. That caught him off guard. You knew. I overheard enough, I said. I didn't touch the car. Another pause. Longer this time. You might have saved someone's life, he said quietly. I felt something shift in my chest. Not relief. Recognition. That was the point. He exhaled slowly. They cut the line clean. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. I didn't respond. I'm going to handle my son, he continued. But this won't stay quiet. I don't expect it to, I said. We ended the call without saying goodbye. I set the phone down and stared at the table. The grain in the wood looked sharper, more defined, like my vision had adjusted to a new light. For the first time since last night, my hands started to shake. Not from fear. From release. Up until that moment, everything had been theory. Planning. Control. Now it was real. The police were involved. The truth was loose. And there was no pulling it back. My wife came into the kitchen then. Her face was pale, eyes sharp with calculation. "You spoke to him," she said. "Yes." "What did you say?" "Enough." Her jaw tightened. "You've put us all at risk." I stood up slowly. For once, I didn't rush to de-escalate. "No," I said. "I ended the risk." She laughed, short and bitter. "You think this makes you some kind of hero?" I met her gaze. "I don't care what it makes me." That stopped her. Because it was true. For years, every decision I made passed through one filter. How will this keep the peace? That filter was gone. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere in the distance. Maybe unrelated. Maybe not. I felt the house tilt, not physically but morally. Like the center of gravity had shifted, and everything unstable was about to slide. That night, no one cooked. We ate separately. Spoke in fragments. My stepson stayed in his room. I heard him pacing. Once, I heard something hit the wall. I didn't intervene. Some lessons don't need translators. Before bed, I stood at the window again, looking at the empty space in the driveway. The absence felt loud. But it also felt right. I understood then that I hadn't just sent a car away. I'd sent away the version of myself who believed protecting people meant protecting their secrets. Tomorrow, consequences would start knocking. Legal. Emotional. Permanent. For the first time, I wasn't bracing for them. I was ready. Because whatever came next, at least it wouldn't come from something I'd ignored. The house didn't explode the way I thought it might. It curdled. That's the only word that fits. Like milk left out too long, quietly turning while no one was looking. The morning after the tow, I woke up to the sound of drawers slamming. Not violently. Deliberately. Each one a punctuation mark. I stayed in bed and listened. For years, that sound would have pulled me out of the room instantly, ready to mediate, to soften whatever edge was forming. Today, I let it pass. When I finally stepped into the kitchen, my wife was already dressed. Shoes on. Phone in hand. Her movements were sharp, efficient. "We need to talk," she said. I poured coffee. She stared at me like I'd just insulted her. "You don't get to ignore this," she said. I met her eyes calmly. "I'm not ignoring it." "Then what do you call this?" She waved her phone. "Do you have any idea what kind of damage you've done?" "Yes," I said. "Prevented." Her mouth tightened. "You don't know that." "I do." That certainty rattled her more than anger ever would have. My stepson appeared in the doorway then. Her jaw clenched. He looked smaller than he had 2 days ago. Not younger, smaller. "They're asking questions," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. I nodded. "They should." He stepped forward, eyes flashing. "You had no right." I took a breath. "So, I had every right," I said. "And so did the person you put in danger." My wife snapped, "Stop talking to him like that." I turned to her. "Like what?" "Like he's a criminal." "He is," I said. The word hit the room like dropped glass. My stepson laughed. "Hi, brittle. You think they're going to believe you? You're nothing here." There was the sentence he'd been holding back for years. I felt it land and pass through. "I don't need them to believe me," I said. "I need the truth to exist." He took another step closer. "You ruined my life." I shook my head. "You paused it." Silence stretched. My wife's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then again. Her face drained of color. "It's his father," she whispered. I didn't move. She answered, turned away, lowered her voice, but I heard enough. "Yes." "No, I didn't know. What do you mean, police report?" My stepson's confidence collapsed in real time. He sat down hard at the table, elbows on knees, breathing shallow. For the first time, I saw fear that wasn't performative. My wife hung up slowly. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. "They're coming," she said. "Good," I replied. She stared. "You don't even care what this does to us." I set my mug down carefully. "I care what it stops." That was the moment the house chose sides. She turned away from me. Physically. Emotionally. "You should leave," she said. "Before this gets worse." I nodded once. I will. Not in retreat. In preparation. I went to the bedroom and opened the closet. The suitcase was still there, buried behind coats I hadn't worn in years. As I packed, I noticed how little was actually mine. Clothes, books, tools. No keepsakes. No photographs with me at the center. The realization didn't hurt. It clarified. When I carried the suitcase to the door, my stepson was standing in the hallway. "This isn't over," he said. "I know," I replied. "That's why I did it." He searched my face for anger. Found none. That scared him more. Outside, the air felt lighter. Not easier, lighter. Like I could breathe deeper without asking permission. I put the suitcase in my car and sat behind the wheel without starting it. Inside the house, movement continued. Calls. Arguments. Panic. I stayed still. Because for the first time, the chaos wasn't mine to manage. As I pulled away, I looked at the house one last time. It wasn't home anymore. It was a crime scene waiting for daylight. And I wasn't going back in to clean it up. The knock came sooner than I expected. Not loud. Not aggressive. Professional. I was in a small rental room on the other side of town, sitting on the edge of a bed that smelled faintly of detergent and someone else's life. The TV was on without sound. Morning light pressed through thin curtains. When the knock came, I didn't flinch. I already knew who it would be. I opened the door to two men in plain clothes. No uniforms. No raised voices. One held a small notebook. The other watched everything. "Sir," the taller one said, "we need to ask you a few questions." I nodded and stepped aside. They didn't rush. Neither did I. We sat at the small table by the window. One of them asked if I wanted a lawyer. I said not yet. Not because I was brave, but because I had nothing to hide. That realization settled me more than anything else had. They asked me to start from the beginning. So I did. I told them about coming home early. About hearing the sentence. I repeated it exactly as I remembered it. I didn't add emotion. I didn't soften it. I didn't speculate. I already cut the brakes. The man with the notebook stopped writing. "Who said that?" he asked. "My stepson." "And who was he speaking to?" "My wife." The second man leaned back slightly, watching me more closely now. I explained why I didn't confront them. Why I didn't touch the car. Why I called the tow company instead of the police. I expected judgment. What I got was silence. Finally, the taller man nodded. "You preserved the evidence?" he said. "Yes." That was the right call. The words landed heavier than I expected. They asked me to confirm addresses. Phone records. I answered everything without hesitation. Then came the question I'd been waiting for. "Did you know the intended victim?" "No," I said. "But I knew the outcome." That seemed to satisfy them. After they left, the room felt smaller, but cleaner. Like something infected had been cut away. I sat there for a long time afterward, hands resting on my knees, breathing slowly. This was the moment I'd been bracing for. And it hadn't broken me. Later that day, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my wife. I let it ring. Then again. Then a message. They took him in for questioning. I closed my eyes. I felt grief then. Real grief. Not for what was happening, but for what had already been lost long before this. Another message followed. "You could have handled this differently." I typed once. Deleted it. Typed again. Finally I sent. "I handled it responsibly." Nothing came back. In the evening, the biological father called again. "They confirmed it," he said. "Brake line was severed. Clean cut." I exhaled slowly. "The officer said if you hadn't acted," he stopped. "I know," I said. There was silence on the line. Then quietly, "Thank you." That word did something to me. Not pride. Closure. After the call, I went for a walk. No destination. Just movement. Men passed me on the sidewalk. Some on phones, some rushing, some lost in thought. I wondered how many of them were carrying something heavy and invisible. I thought about masculinity. About how often it's defined as dominance or noise. But this had required stillness. Restraint. Willingness to be misunderstood. Back in the room, I sat on the bed and stared at my hands. These hands had fixed leaks, built shelves, sunjets, packed boxes. They hadn't touched the car. They hadn't caused harm. They had chosen not to look away. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in days. No dreams, just rest. Because somewhere beneath the chaos, beneath the consequences still unfolding, I understood something important. Whatever came next, I would face it without flinching. And that was new. People like to believe that doing the right thing feels clean. It doesn't. It feels expensive. I learned that in the days that followed, when the adrenaline wore off and reality began collecting its dues. The call from my wife came 3 days later. Not angry. Not frantic. Flat. "We need to talk about arrangements," she said. Arrangements. Like we were dissolving a business, not a marriage. I agreed to meet her at the house. Not because I wanted closure, but because some endings deserve witnesses. The house looked smaller when I pulled into the driveway. Or maybe I was just standing taller. Inside, everything was neat. Too neat. Surfaces cleared. Emotions packed away like fragile items marked "Do Not Open." She didn't offer me coffee. "We can't do this anymore," she said, getting straight to it. I nodded. I know. That threw her. She'd expected resistance. Bargaining. Apologies. "What you did," she began. "I stopped something irreversible," I said. She exhaled sharply. "You destroyed our family." I shook my head slowly. "No. I exposed it." Silence stretched between us. "He's being charged," she said finally. "I know. You don't even sound upset." I considered that. "I'm grieving," I said. "Just not the way you want me to." Her eyes searched my face for weakness. For regret. She didn't find it. "I need you out by the end of the week," she said. "I already am," I replied. That was the moment she realized she'd lost leverage. We spoke about logistics after that. Dividing things. Responsibilities. Words stripped of emotion. At the door, she stopped me. "You chose strangers over us," she said. I met her gaze evenly. I chose not to be complicit. Outside, the air felt colder. Sharper. I sat in my car for a long time afterward, hands on the wheel, breathing through something heavy that pressed behind my ribs. This was the cost. Loneliness without illusion. That week at work, the consequences followed me there too. HR called me in. Asked questions about stress. About focus. About whether I needed time off. What they meant was, "Are you still useful?" I told them the truth. "I'm clear," I said. For the first time in a long time. They didn't know what to do with that. I was passed over again. Not officially. Quietly. I didn't argue. Because something inside me had shifted. I wasn't measuring my worth by approval anymore. One evening, a friend asked me if I regretted it. I didn't answer right away. Regret is a tricky word. It asks if you'd prefer comfort over conscience. "No," I said finally. "But I miss what I thought I had." He nodded. That was enough. Later that night, alone in the rental room, I unpacked the last of my things. There wasn't much. A few shirts. A couple of books. Tools I'd carried from place to place. I realized then how lightly I'd been living, how little I'd needed to lose to gain myself back. The mirror above the dresser caught my reflection. I looked older. Not worn. Defined. I thought about my stepson, about where arrogance had taken him, about how silence had fed it. I thought about my wife, about the lines she'd crossed quietly, telling herself it was loyalty. And I thought about myself, the man who had stayed too long, but also the man who had finally left. Doing the right thing hadn't saved my marriage. It hadn't protected my career. It hadn't made me popular or praised. But it had done something quieter. It had given me my spine back. That night as I lay down to sleep, the loneliness was still there. But it wasn't hollow. It was honest. And honesty, I was learning, is a form of strength. Tomorrow I would start over. Not with hope. With clarity. It ended without fireworks. No courtroom speech. No public apology. No moment where everyone suddenly understood what I'd done and why. Just a morning that arrived quietly, like it had every right to. I woke before the alarm, sunlight stretching across the floor of the rental room. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was, or why. Then the memories settled in, orderly now, no longer sharp enough to draw blood. This was my life. Smaller. Clearer. I made coffee and drank it slowly, standing by the window. Down on the street, people moved with purpose, heading to jobs, obligations, routines they believed would keep them safe. I used to believe that too. Safety, I'd learned, isn't about avoiding disruption. It's about being able to live with yourself when disruption comes. The case moved forward without me. That was intentional. I gave my statement once more, answered follow-up questions, and then stepped back. The truth didn't need me hovering over it. One afternoon, I got a message from the biological father. They're proceeding. No plea deal. I read it twice. Thank you again, he added. I didn't reply right away. Gratitude still felt strange, like something I hadn't earned enough practice receiving. When I finally did respond, it was simple. I hope he learns. That was all. Because learning, not punishment, had always been the point. At work, things remained unchanged. No promotion. No redemption arc. Just quiet acknowledgement that I was still useful, but no longer invisible to myself. I started setting boundaries. Leaving on time. Saying no without explanation. Some people didn't like it. That was fine. I had spent too many years mistaking approval for peace. On a Saturday morning, I drove past my old neighborhood by accident, or maybe not. The house was there, unchanged. Lawn trimmed. Curtains drawn. Someone else's problem now. I didn't slow down. Later that day, I went for a long walk. No headphones. No distractions. Just the sound of my own footsteps keeping pace. I thought about masculinity. About the stories we're told, that strength is volume, dominance, winning. What no one tells you is that sometimes strength is standing still while everything you built walks away. And not chasing it. I thought about the man I'd been when this started. Tired. Afraid of conflict. So desperate to keep things together that I'd almost let something unforgivable happen. And I thought about the man I was becoming. Not louder. Not richer. Just aligned. That alignment showed up in small ways. Sleeping through the night. Looking people in the eye. Making decisions without rehearsing how to justify them. Weeks later, I found myself standing in front of a mirror again, this time without searching for answers. I knew who I was. I was the man who heard something terrible and didn't pretend it was none of his business. The man who chose consequences over comfort. The man who didn't look away. Life didn't reward me for it, but it respected me. And for the first time in my adult life, that was enough. That night, as I turned off the light, I felt something settle into place. Not happiness. Quiet. Unshakable. And I knew, without needing proof, that whatever came next, I would meet it standing straight. Because once you stop looking away, you don't forget how to see.